Good morning. Good morning. How is everyone today? Thank you all for joining us today for Yes We Can Prevent Domestic Violence Love Shouldn't Hurt event. Today we have a full complement of speakers that will be giving us information about different organizations within Prince George's County and the surrounding areas and what they do to help prevent domestic violence and how they help the domestic violence survivors take their path forward. There are several people that I would like to thank today. We have Andrea Coleman from Senator Van Hollen's office. She is Constituent Services for Prince George's County and the surrounding area. We will have Todd Turner has sent his regards to everybody and wanted me to make sure to say hello and to enjoy the event. Erica Heiner, are you here? Nope? Okay. As we go through the day, we will have several speakers that will be coming in and going out. Please feel free to ask any of us any questions that are involved with the organizations that are partnering today. The 4 organizations that are partnering are Community Crisis Services. We have the Progressive Life Center. We have, thank you, Grace Lutheran Church, and we have the Bowie Supportive Housing Services. I would also like to thank Prince George's County Legal Services. If you could stand up, please. All 4 organizations do have information on either side of our room. Please make sure that you are taking information and make sure that you are letting us know if you have any questions. At this point, I would like to bring up Tim Jansen, Chief Executive Officer of Community Crisis Services, Michelle Salters-Williams, who is the Interim Director of the former Family Crisis Services, Gary Allen, who is the CEO of Bowie Supportive Housing, Lisa Streeter, and Yvette from Progressive Life Center. If you could come up, please. And Pastor Wendy Deben from Grace Lutheran Church. Thank you.
It's always funny, I don't need a mic if anybody who knows me knows me. So thank you all for coming out today on a beautiful Saturday to address this challenge in our community because love should not hurt. The folks that are standing on stage with me are some of the amazing individuals that help with all the services and all the partner agencies today that are going to help us work to eradicate the issue of domestic violence. Again, this doesn't happen with all your help and support. One incidence of domestic violence is too many, and we're going to work very diligently to start all of the services that help us to prevent that. So thank you all for coming out today. Any of you want to make a report?
Good morning. Let me add my welcome to Tim and to Bill's, and let me thank you very much for coming out this morning. As they mentioned, my name is Gary Allen, and I'm the president of the Bowie Supportive Housing Corporation. I think it's fortuitous that we're gathered here not only on a very bright and warm Saturday, but we also find ourselves in the Lenten season as we look forward in just 3 weeks to celebrating Easter. And at that point, the Christian community begins to talk about the resurrection power of God. That, in fact, is the fundamental belief behind the Bowie Supportive Housing Corporation, as 8 local area Bowie churches have come together to work on what we've come to call collaborative community ministry. That's because each of us is too small and our budget's too fragile in order to be able to deal effectively with domestic violence in this community and to be a partner with CCSI in Prince George's County. But together, there is synergy. Together, these churches have come together and collaborate. So we have begun to work together as a board We've begun together to define how we can collaboratively work together to affirm a way to admit clients. We have invested and committed to 2 houses in Bowie. That's a major commitment for those of you because somebody didn't just hand us those houses. We actually invested in the mortgage for these houses. And to give you an idea of how it works, our second house called Beta House, our first one's called Alpha House. Beta House was an estate sale, which the local real estate community stepped forward and allowed us to identify with, and we bought it directly from the family when the owner died. But it hadn't been renovated in more than 30 years. And so a local corporation, local home builders in our area stepped forward and helped us to begin the renovation. But that wasn't enough. More than every church contributed more than 2,000 hours of volunteer time to help us renovate that facility and turn it into an acceptable place for up to 5 clients to live in a comfortable residential setting right here in our community. Today, we can accommodate about 9 different clients, and we have space available. Our mission is not merely to provide transitional housing. It is to provide client services that allow victims of traumatic violence, women and their young children, to move to more independent living within 12 to 24 months. We've experienced some successes, but as my volunteers would also point out, we've also had some setbacks. Because each situation is an individual one. And so we work with each client each week to help them set goals, to help them mature in the achievement of those goals, and to help them to move more successful, independent living arrangement in their lives. I hope you'll take the opportunity to pick up one of our brochures. It's frankly one of the first ones we've ever produced, even though we've been in this business a long time. And again, I want to thank you very much and hope I have a chance to meet and talk with several of you in the time we spend together today. Thank you very much.
Well, good morning, everyone. Well, my name is Yvette Clark, and I'm representing Progressive Life Center, which is a nonprofit human service and child welfare organization. And I'm so happy that you all have taken the time to come out today for such an important issue as this. As was mentioned, we totally cannot operate in silos, and so I'm so glad to see and to hear even about the faith community coming together. That's one of the things that we do as it relates to domestic violence, is working with the faith-based community to do training, to do red flags and bystander training. And so we understand, I know that there's that adage that says it takes a village to raise a child, but it just takes a village, period. Because we understand that it's affecting so many people. In our organization, we have foster care youth, we have children who are being raised by their caregivers, we have youth who are disconnected, not in school and not employed. And guess what? This is affecting everyone. I'm sure if I were to ask this question, does anyone know someone who has dealt with domestic violence or sexual assault, I would have at least 90% of the people in the room raise their hand, right? So this is a community issue. And so we have to do this thing together. So I'm so happy to be here today and to be able to partake in this discussion, this community discussion, because it's a community affair. And so we just continue to give information, and we just ask you to please definitely go visit our table, all of the tables here, and to just be open. I know that today you're going to hear some things that sound familiar. I hope that you hear some things that are new, and I hope you hear some things that are confirming, and that really propels each and every last one of us to do something even greater than what we've already done. And that's what we're committed to at Progressive Life Center, and with this partnership, that we understand that we cannot do this thing alone. It takes a partnership, it takes the community to really combat this thing called domestic violence. So we thank you for coming out today.
Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. These are some of our partner agencies this afternoon that are going to be presenting to you. Next.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, Pastor Winston will be leading us in our opening prayer, and then she will be talking about domestic violence within the faith congregation. Thank you.
Again, thank you all for being here to raise awareness and to stop the silence, because it's something that we definitely need to work on as a community together. Let us pray. Lord God, relationships are always hard work, but they should never, ever have violence in them. Whether it be physical or mental or emotional abuse, that's not okay. That's not what you created us to be. Be with us today. Help us to come together so that we can stop the silence, so that all can live into right relationships as you have planned. We ask all these things through your holy name. Amen. So this morning I've been asked to talk about domestic violence in the church. And so in my limited lifespan of 38 years, I can tell you growing up in the church that I have always seen domestic violence in the church. In my home congregation, when I was a small child, I remember several couples who went through this. And it's been interesting to watch the trends over time. If the pastor knew it and called out the abusing spouse, you knew for sure that night when they went home that the spouse that they were beating was going to get beat again. There was no follow-up. It was just, you don't do that, that's not what God intends. And then it continued, and everybody just kind of did the whole thing like their head in the sand. Oh yeah, that's so-and-so, that's what they do, and there wasn't any, push for it. And fast forward when I was in seminary and started to do interning and all those kind of things, we hit it more head on to say, this is not okay. Let's get you resources to get you out. Let's move, all those kind of things. And then in my first call in Huntingtown, Maryland, again, watched couples go through this and here at Grace as well. And so I thought what I'd talk about this morning is what our policy is here at Grace if we see this. I'm blessed. I have Donnie Phillips, and I have another parishioner, Carolyn Mulligan, who work with domestic violence victims all the time. So I have two aces in my pocket besides me. I'm usually the first one that finds out. And so usually I would say the harder cases are the ones where it's more of the controlling, emotional, mental kind of abuse, because people don't want to acknowledge that they're in an abusive situation. It's, oh, we just had a fight. And pointing out to somebody because you love and care for them that, no, that's not a fight, that's them controlling you. And that's not okay. If this is supposed to be a partnership, it's not one person calling all the shots and keeping you in their pocket. The more devastating ones, I think, are the ones where there's both the mental, emotional, and then the physical abuse. And so for us, for physical abuse, if I get a phone call from somebody anytime, day or night, that they're in an abusive situation, my first thing is, are you out in a safe location? Were you able to get out of the house? Whether the answer be yes or no, I will go and meet them. We assess, we say, all right, what do we need to do first? Depending on how badly they're hurt, we either go to the emergency room first. If they're just banged up pretty good, then we usually head to the courthouse and get a restraining order. And so for us as a community, once a family member has a restraining order against somebody else, then I'm very clear and say, I need to let our leadership know, our executive committee, which is our council president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. And the reason being is that they need to know is because if the other walks into the sanctuary when one of the people is there and they have a restraining order against them, they can't be there. So we have this set in place as well because I have the bird's eye view up front, just like I have now, to see all of you. So not everybody may know the spouse that's coming in, or the person, partner, whatever, that's doing the abuse. And so we have codes in place so that if I adjust my stole really, really low, then they know that one of those 4 people needs to get up and call 911, no questions asked. And that's with anything for us, whether I see a threat or anything like that. But in this case, it's the same, is that somebody knows that they need to go and call 911 right away. And so I would say the tricky pieces of all of this is it's a process. You know, I know that when somebody is in an abusive relationship, my inclination, you need to get out, you need to leave, and I know that's easier said than done. So it's a cycle of continuing the journey with them and walking this path with them, because oftentimes they do go back. And for us, we've had a situation in our congregation where we had the restraining order. She went back, and husband started to come to church with her all the time. And so, you know, the whole congregation didn't know what was going on, but a couple of us did. And I remember saying to Donnie one Sunday morning, he's like, "How you doing with that?" I said, "You know, I get that everybody is a child of God, everybody deserves a second chance, but knowing what he did to her and taking her to the hospital and spending, you know, over a week with her, putting her up in a hotel, all those kind of things, it's really hard to give him communion when all I really want to do is punch him in the face." And so we joke about that. And an aside, I'm a black belt too. But that also leads the other avenue that I've got when I am meeting with these women, whether it's physical, emotional, or mental abuse, because even if it's only emotional or mental abuse, they can snap at any moment. And so I can show them basic self-defense things that they can get control to get away, that don't leave a mark. One of the things that we learned with one of the situations is that she and her husband were going at it, the cops were called, and because when she slammed the door to try to get away from him, it caught his finger and his finger bled, they were gonna charge her for abuse instead of the man. So there's so many things, you know, so that's why when I share those self-defense things, none of it is about breaking or anything, even though I know how to do all those things about breaking limbs. It's all about getting control and getting out of the situation and all those things that don't leave a mark. And so it's a hard journey, and it's one that's ongoing that we have to keep doing. And, you know, I've said to my community that it's not okay. You know, if somebody tells you something, let me know right away so that I can meet with them and talk with them. And so we've raised a lot of awareness here, which has been very good. And there are people in this community that are just absolutely amazing and will walk alongside people, which is just phenomenal. And so I would encourage you as one thing that if you don't have a plan in place as a congregation, you know, for those things, to work through that. One of the other things that we do too, if I get a call and go and do all those things, we put the person up in the hotel for a night or two for them to regroup. And that reservation is always in my name. And we direct the hotel staff that if anybody calls for them or comes for them, they don't have anybody in the hotel by that name. And it's always somewhere that's at least a half an hour away from where they live, just to give that distance in between. So again, just I encourage you, do you have any questions about what we do? Yes?
I'm wondering if there's any kind of service that is offered to the users.
Right now, for us,
Resource.
yeah, I mean, a lot of times what I'll do is I will resource that out to like Carolyn Mulligan, who works with domestic violence victims and people who are doing it. I think that's one piece where we do need to do a better job. And for me, if somebody comes and talks to me and says, you know, I'm doing this, I've beat my spouse, you know, I say, I'll walk with you, I love you, I care about you, but you need to make some changes, and you're gonna need help to do that. So it's the both and piece. I mean, I will say too, for this community with the couple that I described to you earlier when they started coming to church, that the community surrounded both of them and loved them. And there was only about 4 of us that knew exactly what was going on. And so that makes it easier too, is to keeping that that initial circle small so that the entire congregation can still love and care for them as they go through this process, as hard as it is, because it's going to be an up and down thing. But yeah, good point, and thank you. Any other questions?
When you say that both people were surrounded and loved by the congregation, does that mean like the one partner had a group that sort of related, and then the two different groups that support groups that they had, or what does that look like?
So for us, what that looks like is, in this case, the spouse did not come with the wife a whole lot. And so it was kind of everybody supporting each other. We're a very small community, so our average worship attendance is between 40 and 50 on a Sunday. And so it's just kind of checking in, and they have a son too, and so always checking in with CJ to see how he's doing and all that. And so it's big things that way. So, yes.
I was just wondering, I like the fact that you said that you guys have a code, but I really like to maybe discuss with some other people and brainstorm on how that would look at a mega church, and what those codes would kind of look like. I mean, it just sounds really good, and I'm really glad that it's working for you guys, but I would really like to know maybe some people who maybe brainstorm on what we could do maybe at some of those mega churches to give them the same.
Right, absolutely, because everybody has different polity, different ways, and a mega church is very different than our sanctuary, because I have the vantage point for everything. Yeah, so I think that would be a good conversation to have with your leadership team, maybe have people in strategic positions that they can see, and that there's a way for them to communicate together. Yes?
I wanted to know, since you have everything so close, what about retaliation? Because you're in a close area and everyone knows each other.
Right.
So how safe is that if you have other people who are involved as far as volunteers, family, friends?
That's I would say, one of the most difficult pieces for us, and we still work on that. You know, how do you get out? What is it? I mean, I remember the time when we were talking about the restraining order, and somebody said, well, can't we just not have him come in? And I said, with the restraining order in place, yes, you call 911, and that's what happens, you know. But after that piece, when that happens, everybody's, well, what if he shows up with a gun? And I said, well, everybody goes to the clearest exits, all that kind of things. And they said, well, Pastor, what are you going to do? And I said, I can't answer that till I'm in that situation. And they're like, well, do you know how to take on somebody with a gun? And it's like, so the answer to that is yes, and so does my son, and so does another one of our teens, that we all have our black belts and all those things. But in that sense, our safety is the most important thing. And so we have to take that in consideration and what that looks like. And that's not easy, because our sanctuary actually only has 3 ways in and out. 2 are very small doors, and there's 1 double door. But there's things that we have to work on that way as a community. Any other questions?
I actually don't have a question, but I just want to give an example to, the young lady was asking about, codes for a mega church. I noticed, in outreach, because I know I do a lot of outreach for, domestic violence, a lot of the mega church, they use colors. So it is a committee, that knows what's going on, and, it starts from outside. You know, the mega church, how they have someone who directly in the track, you know, where to park. They have, colors, like flashcards. So whether it be red, blue, so whatever code that they gave to that particular individual, and inside, they will hold that up, so if the person come in, whoever's on that, everyone on the committee had cards. So for the abuser or the perpetrator to come in, they will hold up the card. And so that way they know, that's an alert to escort that person out.
I just wanted to add around the question about user intervention services. So CCSI, through our Family Intervention Clinic, Family Violence Intervention Clinic does offer user intervention programming, and that is available either on a voluntary or court order basis. And so anyone is welcome to, who wants that service and wants to figure out how to change what's happening, can come in and participate, and we offer those services for nominal fee or free of charge.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
And people have their cell phone always near them.
Right.
So if there's an emergency going on, if you're using codes or whatever have you, that would be an alert for everybody in the church, whether that person is an outsider or insider,
Mm-hmm.
to have a response that's appropriate for the situation.
Sure, and it depends on the demographic of our communities too. Like for at Grace, most of my folks don't have cell phones that have the apps on them. They'll have like the flip phones yet because of their age. However, but in bigger churches with younger communities, that absolutely would work. Any other questions or suggestions? Yes.
Just a quick one. How about teens? How do you deal with the teens, and how do you, I guess, train them or talk to them about domestic violence and anything that they see in their house, how to react, how do we train them?
So for us, we don't have a whole lot of teens. The ones that we do are very good. I mean, we've created a culture where they can share with the adults here. They feel like everybody's their aunt or their uncle or their grandparent. And so for them, it's no means no, first off, you know, if somebody says that. And the other piece is that violence is never okay. And so that's something that we're open and honest about. And I think too, one of the things that has helped us too is most of our teens, 3 out of the 4 of them are all black belts. And so there's a whole other level of discipline for them that they know of, because they know if they use the skills that they have, they go to jail, because we're considered, you know, it's not just assault for us, we're assault with a deadly weapon because we are the weapon. And so the kids have had that drilled into their head. They know that no means no, that they know that the skills that they have are to protect and not to cause harm. Yes.
I'd like to piggyback on your question about the teens. Well, sort of a piggyback. Oh, thank you. How are you dealing, well, not you specifically, but how are these programs dealing with children who happen to be the abusers in domestic violence situations? Lately on the news, you've seen all these reports about children killing their grandparents or their parents, and a lot of it's drug related. So how are you dealing with the abuser when the abuser is a child or a young child or an adult child?
Yeah, I was going to say, I haven't had experience with the abuser being the child. What I can say, what we've done with the children that are in those situations is we get them the help that they need, get them counseling, all those kind of things. Because what we found, at least in a lot of those situations, is that one parent pits them against the other and really manipulates them and puts them in a bad way. And so we get them with a good counselor that helps them work through that. We're available for them. You guys may have more about the other situation, since I've never experienced that.
Yeah, so, we don't, at CCSI, we typically deal with intimate partner violence, as opposed to, other types of domestic violence that may be occurring. But I would say that if there's an incident like that reaching out to the county adult protective services division, would be the most appropriate, response to assist the person who may be being abused by a family member.
And I think my time is up, so I'm going to pass my baton to the next person, but thank you, everybody.
Okay, the next speaker that we're going to be bringing up is our Safe Passages Domestic Violence Shelter Manager, Gwen Benton. She will let you know what happens once somebody goes into our Safe Passages shelter and what steps we take from that point on.
Good morning, everyone. So once a victim comes to the once the victim comes to the safe house, they are greeted among staff. They get a tour. We do. They get a tour. We do an intake. We go over the services that is offered at the safe house. They get support groups. They meet with the case, a case manager, case aide. They also have opportunity to meet with the housing specialist if they have any housing needs, issues, or concerns. Last year, in 2018, at the Safe House, we served 130 victims. We also, and with the victims, in 2018, we had 136 children. And also, some of the families had received group counseling for mental health services because a majority of the children had witnessed the abuse, whether they actually saw it or heard it. And they were, the children were starting to act out. They was mimicking what they had saw. So the mom or the dad, because we do serve men too. In 2018, we had 3 men, and one of them had 2 children with them. So they also, get the opportunity to meet with the counselor, to have group sessions, so the children can, I guess, the word I'm trying to say, recover from what they had experienced. Also, at the Safe House, we also do inside activities with the victims as well, and also with the children. University of Maryland come out 3 days a week, and that's like an after-school program with the children, help them with their homework, or just play with them. Also, so the victims can have a little break as well. Let's see. And that's basically really it at the Safe House. Anyone have any questions regarding the Safe House? Yes.
So once a victim arrives at this safe house, how long are they allowed to stay before you have to transition them to some other program or to a place to live?
Okay. We really don't have a time frame because everyone's situation is different. Everyone's needs are different. You might have someone who only needs 1 or 2 days just to stay there and rest because they already have a plan to transition to move to another state with family member or friend, but something occurred and they couldn't stay in the home, where they no longer want to stay in the home while they was waiting to move out of town. We have situations where someone was getting ready to, where individual was getting ready to move into, they had already had their plan, where they was getting ready to move into their own home, but a situation occurred and they needed to escape. So everyone's situation is different. Some are there longer than others because they don't have any income. They never work. They were never allowed to work. So that's when the case manager and the case aide, they work diligently, tried to, help them with their resume, help them to look for employment, to gain income, and then start looking into housing programs.
And what's your capacity?
53 beds. Any other questions? Yes.
I have a couple. What percentage, I guess, probably in a year, goes back to the abuser? Okay, so your first question, say it again.
Or the percentage back to the abuser.
What percentage that went back? So in 2018, out of the 130, I want to say it was like 20 to 25 that had went back. But before they go back, and if we actually know, we will safety plan with them, and we will give them resources, and they always know they already know that they could call us back if they need support. So we support them, even if they came in, you know, they was hospitalized before coming into the safe house, and if they want to return, we just support them through their process and safety plan with them.
So from the ones that stay in the area, how many have moved on and have, you know, their life back together?
I would say, so a majority of them went with friends, family, and I'm trying to think of the numbers because I don't remember.
There were about, there's about 40 households who we assisted in getting into other safe housing of their own. And then there's another large percentage of people who go to stay with friends or family because that may be a safe environment for them. We don't have the capacity, and not everybody really wants us to do follow-up with them, you know, kind of down the line. So we are certainly there if people need us. So I can't say whether or not people, you know, at some point down the line maybe decide to return. I think it's really important to note that it takes an average of 11 times for someone to leave their abuser. And the most dangerous time for them is when they are trying to leave. And so, it's certainly understandable that people come in, they're in a relationship, and they want to make that relationship work. They just want the abuse to stop. And so, we certainly understand that people are choosing to return to their abusers. We safety plan with them to make sure that they have a way to find an exit if things start to escalate again. And sometimes, you know, sometimes people are able to fix their relationship. I don't want to make it seem like it's you know, you leave and that's it. There's a lot that goes into this, and so a lot of emotions, a lot of attachment. In the same way that we have those same relationships in all of our lives, right? So we really want to support the survivor with whatever they are choosing to do. We want to make sure they know that they're welcome to return to us at any time if they need safety.
And the last one, I'm not done yet.
Okay.
You never are ready.
I think I need a microphone, but I'm loud.
For those of you in the back, I will try and get the microphones out to everybody that's asking questions so you can make sure to hear.
Okay, and the last one, which has got bigger, you know, in our Latino population, we have a big ratio of abusers and from both sides. And there has been a lack of help of bilingual resources. What are we doing in the safe house, and what's been the percentage of people? I just referred somebody a couple of weeks ago, hopefully she got the help. And I just want to know what kind of things do you have implemented to help our population with the bilingual resources?
So with the bilingual resources, we do have a few agencies that we work with, and it's very limited in Prince George's County, but we reach out to we will reach out to DC, we will reach out to Montgomery County, and we also will reach out to Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence, and those agencies has been very helpful.
We have, I think, 2 bilingual counselors on staff for the agency. There may be more, actually. And so we certainly utilize those persons where language, you know, is
The language
a barrier
barrier.
to the person receiving assistance. So we try to incorporate whatever's needed for that survivor. We also use other technology like the language line and things like that to kind of help us in that day-to-day communication. I think it's very interesting that on the shelter side, we've seen I would say a lower
victim has been put into a safe place, what is the treatment for the abuser, and what's the criteria for returning the couples together, the partners back together?
So that's actually up to the victim. So if the
Pardon me, sir?
it's actually up to the victim, because at the safe house, we do not contact their abuser. We don't contact their abuser. Now, if they come to us and they say that they want to reconnect with their abuser, we provide them resources. We let them know that we have our abuser intervention program, and we will give them all the information that they need along that.
Is the abuser required to go through the intervention program before they return back to their partner?
No, because not all victims come through the police or through the courts.
So the problem is not being solved, it's just being stalled.
Witness.
So there's not a requirement for any survivor to share their victim's information with us, okay? That's something that if they choose not to share their abusers' information with us. There's also no requirement that the two parties participate in any intervention. So I think it's really important, for us to acknowledge that it really is up to the survivor, as Gwen said, because we don't know if that person wants to return to that abuser, if they're planning to make a break, and they really don't want to give any idea of where they may be located. The point of the safe house is really to maintain a high level of safety and confidentiality for that person. Now, there are cases in which we actually do see the abuser come in through our abuser intervention program, but those two services are not connected. And they're really very individualized in terms of what each party wants to work on for themselves.
Is the abuser required to go to the intervention program?
Their abuser is not required by us to do anything, and neither is the survivor. The courts may require that an abuser attend an abuser intervention program, and if so,
I
they
said
may
if it
refer.
make it to court.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna address quickly that, because I am a survivor.
So I'm Emilio Garcia, and I'm the board for Community Crisis. I am a survivor, and he was required by court to go back and have sessions. At the sessions, he was very, very verbally abusive, and they decided that he can no longer be in touch with me because it's up to me, and I say no, it's enough. So they do try, the court system do try, but it's up actually to us, the abuser, to be a man or a woman, or it's also us. And I just decided I don't want to deal with this anymore because it's going to go back to the same thing.
And sir, just so you're aware, while we are not legally able to force somebody to go into treatment, our Maryland 211 database has over 6,000 different referrals throughout the state of Maryland and the surrounding area for people that are not necessarily ready to do a protective order. They're not necessarily ready to take that next step, but they are looking for counseling. One of the things that we're doing through our family program is actually a faith-based perpetrator counseling service. And you can call us for further information on that. We make sure that with each domestic violence call that comes in and with each person that comes into the safe house, that we are following their plan. While we will try and help guide them, they have to be the individual and the family that decides what their next steps are going to be. And we can't force somebody to take the next step if they're not ready.
She was giving you the mic.
I'm just curious as to how many military victims you've worked with in the last couple of years.
So in 2018, I want to say we had, it was 3. In 2017, we had 6.
Well, one of the things that I hear, thankfully I've never experienced this myself, but sometimes when someone is going persuade that person to come back, you know, but then, so, you know, if that partner believes that and comes back, then, so it happens again. I mean, so it's like one of those things where it sounds, so I mean, that is so scary too. So how do you guys believe them or say, oh, this is going to happen again? Most likely it'll happen again. They're just trying to do it again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's the, we don't necessarily know, and, you know, they certainly know that individual better than we do. And it totally has to be, their decision, in terms of what happened, and what they decide. I mean, I just think it comes down to the fact that relationships, and especially relationships that involve children, are very complicated. Right? They're very people, you know, still love each other, right? And the survivor wants these issues to stop. They still love that person, but they might just want the abuse to stop. And so we can't really, you know, we can't really say and we can't really judge in any way what a person decides to do because we all, you know, don't know what we would do in that same situation. So we try to just be supportive of whatever that victim wants to pursue at that time. I mean, I say this to Gwen all the time. I mean, they know where we're at. You know, once they know where we're at. If you're unsafe, just come back. Don't call, just show up, right? Like, you know, we're here to help you. We want you to be able to get to a safe place anyway.
So with a situation like that, I know if we had a few families that were at the safe house and they told their children that they were going to go back. It could have been with their father or it could have been, you know, the stepfather. And where the children got upset and started fighting the mom. And they was like, no, I don't want to go back. Why you keep going back? All we're going to do wind up coming back here. He's going to beat you. I'm afraid he might kill you. We see that a lot. And we still, cause at the end of the day, it's still that victim's right. It's still that individual right if they want to go back or not. But we just continue to support them and guide them and give them the resources and the tools that they need if they choose to go back.
Okay, so I guess this is a question for Safe House and Movie Support Housing Services. What steps do you have with the county that when abusers do come around or come around the premises? What things go into place? Does the county know where these homes are? I'm pretty sure they know where they're located, but is there something, you know, because I live in Bowie, so you know, I don't of course know where the houses are. Is there, and I know there's no way to let us know that the houses are located in our area, but it just, you know, has me wondering, how are we supposed to know about things in the area when we see suspicious activity, I guess, if we see suspicious cars showing up and things like that, like what do you guys have?
So I would say if you see something suspicious in your happening in your neighborhood, call police. It's not 900 times out of 10. It's probably not related to anything having to do with domestic violence in terms of the story we're discussing today. Our locations are confidential. You know, if there have been times when the user has figured it out or followed someone, but we have a very safe building. We have cameras. And we call police. Right? The minute we see anybody that shouldn't be there, we call police.
I mean, even as an advocate, if I know that I'm in the area or, you know, it just, I'm just kind of.
Yeah.
You know, I just say, don't get involved, that's
Right.
right. Say nothing, you know what I mean? I'm just wondering how does that look for individual houses where they do have cameras into the houses? Are they required to have some type of security so that they can?
You talking about the safe houses or are you talking about? Yeah. So we're in the house. I mean, it's a house. So we have cameras. I think now most houses have cameras. Really, it seems like I'm on the like ring doorbell neighbor never see us. So they are currently your neighbors, your church members, right? So
Yep.
you're probably going up to their house, right? So I want to just have people recognize that this, these programs pose no active,
Nope.
danger to anyone else in the community because they are not the center of this type of activity. This type of activity is taking place throughout our county in every single neighborhood, in every single church, in every single business, in every single institution. And so there's not a reason to think about one of these homes, if I told you where they were, to be in a, to think of that as a threat, right? No more so than really your neighbor right now, right?
Did we have other questions?
Right here, Bill.
Yes.
So I know that you guys said that the safe houses, sometimes people are prepared to go to a safe house, or they might have their own plan to get out, and they just that abrupt moment they have to get out. But sometimes I'm sure that there are people who may not have been prepared, who may not have known. So they're leaving maybe with their families or their children. And like for example, I have a daughter who outgrows everything. And how can the community assist in maybe like contributing toys, books, clothing, for some people who may not have been prepared to leave their home with clothes and stuff and to leave everything. And I look at the stories where they say that foster children have to take trash bags with them and they're not prepared, and maybe when they go to court they get like a teddy bear. Sometimes the children that who may not see it, or but they hear it, or they do see it. The fact is that they have just gone through a traumatic event, and then they go to a place that is different, that might be scary. How can the community assist in maybe providing items that the children and the family can use?
So on our website, it's actually listed on the CCSI website of the items that we are in need of, and you can always call as well, and we'll be glad to tell you of the items that we need. I do know offhand, like toys, we definitely could use toys, toiletries. I do know linen, twin size linen for the bed, also washcloths and towels. Yes, ma'am.
Were there any other questions?
Yeah, sure.
Yes. Where?
Right here.
This young lady brought up
All right. I'm aware of the microphone.
I was just saying that this young lady brought up an excellent point. If the victim has to leave in a hurry and doesn't have clothing for the children or for themselves, male or female, where are you getting the clothing for these victims?
From the community.
Okay, but you didn't mention that, and I don't see it on CCSI's list of things that we can donate. So how are you handling those donations?
We actually have a donation coordinator. We have a donation coordinator. So right there, Nathan, right here in the back.
Nathan Dines is our volunteer and donation coordinator, and you can reach him by dialing 211 or 301-864-7095.
That's what we need to know. Bring the clothing to you. Thank you.
It was right there.
Other questions?
It's not necessarily a question, but I think that piggybacking on what you were saying, Bill, I think we need to make sure that folks understand the difference between the alpha and beta homeless shelters that we provide. Shelter for those who
House are in Bowie through Bowie Supportive Housing, which are domestic violence transitional housing units. The Safe Passages Shelter is Domestic Violence Safe House. The Warm Lakes Shelter that CCSI also runs is for those individuals and families that are currently experiencing homelessness. Did that clarify what you wanted to clarify?
Okay, thank you, Bill. It's important to recognize that our services, when you come into Alpha and Beta House, we're not a shelter. We're not a temporary type of arrangement. When you come to us, you go through a process of assessment. And the assessment is designed to figure out whether or not you're in a position in your life that is the victim of domestic violence, where you want to move ahead independently, where you have a situation where you have the potential for future income or maybe a present job, where you're interested in retraining, or your kids have other situations. And then if you move in with our program, you sign a covenant. And the covenant commits you to certain kinds of objectives with the counselors. You have to agree to meet with them. You have to agree by the house rules. You have to agree to sit out each week to review the kinds of commitments that you've made with our counselors. And you have to begin to matriculate over a course of 6, 12 to 24 months. That's our maximum. To move toward those objectives so that we can assist you, not merely to provide low-income housing, because we do that. You can live in our house for $200, $300, $400, okay? It's a very modest cost, and therefore a lot of people get confused and begin to think of us as simply affordable housing. We're not affordable housing, even though we're very affordable. Okay? We're really about this transition to more independent living so that we can take a victim of traumatic violence and move them to independent living, to give them the life skills, the confidence, and ultimately the community support that they need. And by the way, I'll mention one more thing, because this is kind of critical. Our houses are in residential settings. We're right in the community. We work with the local churches, and therefore we take the extra step of working with the community's leadership, of working with the leadership of the local churches, of working with the neighbors to provide assurance that we're not bringing violence into their neighborhood. Because frankly, anytime you have transitional housing, and there are various types of transitional housing in any community, there's always the fear that you're creating potential disruption in that community. And remember, we don't exist by legal right to be there. We don't have the protection of Maryland and local law to do this kind of thing. We exist because of frankly, the goodwill of the community that supports us. So our network of local churches, and you recall I use that phrase, collaborative community ministry, is very critical. We work with the community's leadership and the community. We work with the local churches. We try very hard to make sure that our neighbors know that they can support our work, and we invite them in before we ever open the door. When we opened Beta House, we had community assurance meetings. We invited the police in, and the police we work with the local police department, because there's all sorts of issues that people are concerned about. People can hypothetically imagine all sorts of issues. Now the good news is that in the years we've operated, we've had very few of those. Very few of those. But frankly, we're dealing with broken families. We're dealing with people in need of real, strong, personal support. And those things we have mentioned earlier. We've had great successes. We just had one planned move to own home. But we've also experienced setbacks. Okay? And so you can't really have one without the other. My board would love to have perfect plans. Take a look at our services and the churches in this community that have stepped forward to offer, because that's the first step, I think, to building community support in any program. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I announce to you our final speaker before lunch. She is a survivor, advocate, and author. Please welcome Miss Lloyd Bell, Maxine Lloyd Bell.
Can I sit down here? Of course. Okay, so I'm a pastor also, in all the testimony. I feel like saying, let the church say amen.
I'm sorry, I didn't need you up there for the video.
Oh, okay.
For the rest of my speakers, I do need you up on the podium for the video. Thank you.
Okay, I like to move around. Good morning still to everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. There have been just some wonderful speakers and information that's going forward. A lot of information that I've heard and some things that I have not heard. And I see that each and every one of us, because we're each individuals, we each work in different areas, we each have individual thoughts and we have individual feelings, and sometimes we don't always agree with the answers that we receive because we do some things differently. So one of the things that I have learned is that we're all different, but we're all the same. We're all human. And that's one of the most important things that I bring in my message on today, is that we're all human. And we all experience adversity. We all experience trauma in some ways, but that's part of my story. I have been asked really to talk about overcoming domestic violence, and also to talk about what the faith community can do. So briefly, I just want to share a little bit to say, for 23 years, I was married for 23 years, and all 23 of those years was basically in domestic violence. I was a victim. Even before we were married, all of the red flags were there. However, I was ignorant of them, and I didn't know that term, domestic violence. And so for 23 years, I was going through sexual, economic, physical, emotional, psychological abuse. The only thing that I knew is that something was not right, and I'm not supposed to feel this way. I was brought up in a Christian home, so I had always believed that there is a God, and if I prayed enough as to what I was taught in church, that everything would be okay. Even to the point of making sure that my children were safe. I have 3 children by that marriage. And I always believed that it was going to be okay, but something still was not right. Something kept gnawing at me to say something isn't right. But I stayed. I was brought up to believe that God hated divorce, so that was spiritual abuse as well. So pastors and faith community, be careful how you use the scriptures and not use them out of context. But I believe that. And also I believe that we're all supposed to forgive. That's a scriptural reference also. However, I came to understand, yes, we do, but that's a process. And then the third thing is that I was supposed to be submissive to my husband. So that's the third scripture. And a lot of times in the churches, those scriptures are used to hold victims in a domestic violence situation, because it did me. Finally, it escalated to the point, the reason why I stayed, and after I got out of the situation and started learning about domestic violence, and the saying that a woman may hear 7 times, today I heard 11 times, before they leave an abusive situation, I did. I left several times. I didn't count, so I don't even know how many times I left. But I did leave, but I always went back. And I kind of went back at the prompting of my parents, because they believe God hates divorce, and they stayed in their marriage. They were married for about 49 years before my mom passed, right before their 50th. So, but again, as I learned about what domestic violence is, then I knew that was what had happened to me.
I finally left the situation when the abuse spilled over into my children. And so that was my breaking point. That was my, okay, so this is it. And we all have our breaking point. And that's one of the things that we have to remember when we're dealing with domestic violence victims or sexual assault, is that there are victims. I was a victim. So I don't need to be victimized again by someone telling me what I should do, how I should act, where I should go, and the pity party. And that's not what I needed. I needed support, I needed help. My family wasn't a great support because all of us were family and we were all raised the same way. But I saw in me something else that was working in terms of resilience and courage, strength and faith and hope that I could overcome this. Was it easy? No, it wasn't. But the way that I overcame it was I still believed in God. I still had my faith. And that's really what kept me going, was my faith and the hope and trust that God was going to deliver me out of this and I was going to be for the better. And that's exactly what happened. I overcame it through education. I overcame it because I wanted to know what was happening to me or what had happened to me. I wanted to understand from the spiritual standpoint as to what was happening and what does God's word say about all of this. I wanted to understand psychologically in terms of my spirit and my soul. And that was very troubled, very broken, and how I was going to heal. I wanted to understand psychologically in terms of how my mind thought and how my mind still thinks at times, because what I believe from that day, I still have thoughts. And we're all going to continue to have thoughts. So one of the things that I learned is that, yes, I can forgive, but I have not forgotten. But because I have not forgotten, that is what has helped me to overcome. Because at that point, after I went to school and I got my bachelor's degree in psychology to understand the psychological piece of it, I went to divinity school, got my master's of divinity to understand not only the spiritual and the scriptures, but also the theological implications of what was happening and what was going on with me. And truly, it's put me in a place now that even I understand psychologically what's happening in the world and what we're going through today, because we're each individuals and we each make a choice. That's the beauty of us being created and made in the image of God, that He's given us choice. And so each choice that we make, it may impact ourselves, but it may impact someone else. And so, and then lastly, I went back to school for my third master's in pastoral counseling, psychotherapy, and integrative spirituality. That's how I overcame. And so, because of that, thank you. To God be the glory. Because it was only through Him working in me and continues to work in me that I go back out and I give back to my community. After I started, I think my first domestic violence conference was in 2003. And I was able to connect with a lot of resources, and I started networking with different people. I worked with the sheriff's office in Prince George's County. You may remember him, Michael Jackson, when he was first running for office. And I worked with his office a lot. I worked with the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence. I worked with the Jewish International. And so one of the things and the myths that we have to dispel is that domestic violence is only in the African American community. It has no respect of person. It has no respect of religion. It has no respect of anything, except for it does what it does. And that power and control that drives so many people. Power and control is not something that gets done. It only gets done through people. And so that's one of the things that we have to realize what we're working against. We're working against power and control that's being exerted through people. And the only way that we can eradicate domestic violence from our communities is through working with people. One of the things that God charged me with as I went about speaking and telling my story, that was also part of my healing. The more that I told my story, the better that I got, the better that I felt. Because my story began to break down strongholds in other people. And I saw victims coming forward, finding their voices, stopping their silence, and starting to talk about domestic violence. But God charged me with, I've given you grace. Now you give grace to the perpetrator. You give grace to the person that abused you. You give grace to those persons because they're human, they have their own issues too. And I was like, but Lord. But Lord. So a lot of people even think that they can't question God. But you get through domestic violence, you'll begin to question a whole lot of things. And so that was my question. But I began to understand that yes, they do. We're all individuals, and they too deserve God's grace. They too deserve healing. And as a result of that, I worked with an Episcopal priest, and we developed a curriculum of training that we went all throughout Maryland. This was way back when. And we trained a lot of the faith community through all of the counties in Maryland on domestic violence. Then I had to take a break. So you all have heard about vicarious trauma. Okay, so I was overloaded and I had to step away for a while. But I'm back strong. I'm back doing what God has called me to do, which is to continue to help victims to move forward, to break their silence, but also working with perpetrators. While I was in divinity school, I worked with one of my professors, and it was dealing with actually perpetrators. And so I developed a curriculum called HOPE, Healing of Perpetrators Evolving. And that curriculum is actually to help perpetrators as well. So it's a holistic thing. You know, you gotta find your balance because we're all human. Everyone needs help. Everyone needs hope. And I just thank God that He's used me as a vessel to bring forth a lot of healing in our community. I got the opportunity to test out my curriculum with perpetrators as I was doing my internship at Pasco Family Services. I went in as an intern and was doing psychotherapy with persons that came into their center. And I was charged with conducting a group while I was there. And they said it was a domestic violence group. Well, I thought automatically that it was a victim group. And so that first day when I got there to take the class, I found out it was a perpetrator group. And so it was an extraordinary experience because at that point I could understand as I worked with them psychologically from that psychotherapy standpoint as to at some point they were victims too. As they began to tell their stories about what had happened. Now, does that mean that they get an excuse? No, because again, we all have choice. But we can begin to understand how to relate and find out before we judge, you know, what's going on. And don't get me wrong, I have zero tolerance. My practice is zero tolerance. No one has a right to hit someone, push someone, or do anything against their will because we each are our own individuals. We each have control over ourselves. But because of things in our environment, the way that we were raised, they have a way of impacting us and causing us to act out in certain ways. So I think the more that we educate ourselves, and this is what I will say for the faith community, that your charge is to educate yourself about domestic violence. I have 4 things that I want to share how with the faith community, pay attention to when you have domestic violence in your church. And I will say probably every church has it. I don't care. I've been to churches where women have furs, you know, down to their feet, furs on their head, furs on their fingers, their arms, you know, furs everywhere. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching them. And the Lord is speaking to me as like, that's a victim. Because some of that, all of that cover up is covering up bruises, black eyes, bruised shoulders, and everything else. And so there is no respect of person, of faith, or anything else. It's in our community. It's everywhere. It's in our world. It's a pandemic everywhere. So I would say to pastors, number one, beware of the messages that you are preaching in your churches. Keeping your scriptures in context, because domestic violence can impact your messages that you are preaching. And if you are not even preaching the entire Bible that has several instances of domestic violence in it, then you're not preaching the unadulterated full gospel. So you've got to teach it. You've got to talk about it in your churches and using it in the context in which the scriptures were written. And so that means we do a lot of research, we do a lot of studying. Study those scriptures about domestic violence, such as when Absalom raped his sister Tamar. That's rape, that's incest, that's in the family. Okay? So look at that scripture where you had the very beginning, the first murder, fratricide, Cain killed Abel. All right, so it's in there. Use those scriptures. And when you start to preach and talk about domestic violence, then I heard it say earlier that one of the first places that a victim may go is to her pastor or her faith leader, to the clergy, because that's someone that they may trust. And I will say again, what you say to that person can either save them or it may get them killed. So know what you're preaching and you're teaching and talking about it. So it affects your message. The next thing it does is it affects your ministry. You will begin to do ministry differently in terms of making sure that you have persons, and I heard it earlier again, that there are churches that have domestic violence ministries. Okay, so even if you're not like setting it up as an official group, having persons that are there, that are trained, that are aware. But I would admonish you, the pastor, number one, gets educated about it, and then the leaders that's in the church. Your ushers ministries are excellent. Your ushers ministries, they don't miss a beat. You come in that door, some of them, they see people come in that door every Sunday. You know, and they got your temperature, they gauge who you are, they gauge your mood, and all of that. And so they pay attention to it. Even your nurses. So all of your leadership, those who have intimate contact with your parishioners, make sure that they're trained. And even your lay leaders. Because even your lay leaders, or the lay persons, I should say, they interact with your congregation all the time. You know how we women, we talk about a whole lot of stuff. We do. Y'all laugh, and yeah, we do. We talk about a whole lot of stuff. You know, and sometimes we need to change that conversation of what we're talking about to talking about those things that are important, like, are you safe? What's happening? You know, and it's funny because, you know, girlfriends, they talk about their fellows, their boyfriends, their husbands, they talk about all of that. But have a listening ear. Because those cues, when you're trained to know what domestic violence is and what those red flags are and what those signs are, you can start picking up on some of the things that are being said. They don't always come right out and say them directly as to what they're going through. But they're being said, and we have to be astute enough to listen and to hear what's not being said. Okay? So with that ministry, it will impact the way you do ministry and making sure it's a holistic ministry. Mind, body, and spirit. Make sure there's everything that's covered within your congregations. It also impacts your money. Now I say money because the person who is the big contributor is also the abuser. So you see how that may impact. Because if you're the big contributor and you're helping this church to grow, then I'm not going to sit you down or I'm not going to call you out. But nevertheless, if it's evil that's being done, you know what it says, it will find you out. It will find you out. So be careful about how you look at your money and your finances in your church when it may impact domestic violence and victims. And then the last thing is movement. Movement meaning outside the walls of the church. Yes, the church is for sick people, and we come and go there every day to get our little shot of dose of medicine of the word to help us and strengthen us and encourage us to send us back out into the streets. And so we can't stay inside the walls. The church that I pastor is a church without walls. That means that I'm out in the community. I'm serving seniors, I'm serving young people, I'm serving whoever comes in, I come in contact with. And so that's kind of my spiel. I will take questions. Any questions? Oh, and also just the last thing. I didn't talk a lot about my story because I do have my book. This was my first book. I am the author of I'm Mad as Hell. But I had to cross out the as to put at because I came to understand through, again, understanding domestic violence, all aspects of evil comes from one source that I believe as a Christian, and that's through Satan, the devil, even from the beginning of the Garden of Eden. And so it is a Christian living book, self-help and psychology, which was also an avenue for my overcoming because I wrote that book in a day in a dump. It was like just writing. I had to get it all out. I had to get it all out and then go back and massage it, put it together, get an editor to make it make sense. But I did know that everything that is in this book, it will give you information about, excuse me, understanding domestic violence from all aspects. The name of the book actually is After I'm Mad as at Hell. It's a journey to sanctify, satisfied and single, understanding the dynamics of spiritual warfare and domestic violence. So those things that, we go through that we don't understand, one of the scriptures says, get understanding. You can get understanding, you can have all the knowledge, all the education, but if you don't understand what you have taken in to be able to apply it, which is wisdom, and that's what God He encourages and wants us to do. So I'll take questions.
Mine is pretty much a statement. When we think of domestic violence, we need to think of it in a broader sense as opposed to the intimate partner relationship that we often talk about. We need to look at that household and everyone that lives in that household could be a victim of domestic violence. So I just want to, make sure that we're using our terminology correctly. Domestic violence is household, intimate partner is intimate partner. Secondly, I also want to say that our highest population of victims actually are 16 to 24 years of age. And if we really we're missing that mark when we talk about education, because we need to be educating our middle school children, because they're witnessing what's going on in the household, and they're mimicking it when they have their first, or they start dating, and they take those behaviors into college years. So I just want to say we really need, when we talk about education, we really need to look at our middle school children, because they are actually displaying a lot of that through their bullying. So that was my comment.
And just to piggyback on what Lisa has said, and that is crucial. That is another arena where I am, is in the schools, in the middle schools. And one of the things that also that I use as a takeaway, and in my trainings that I do, is I use an ecological model. What that means is I look at, when I think about my situation in domestic violence, all the different systems that I had to touch, you know, from my immediate family, and then it spread out. It spread out to, because my children were involved, it spread out to the schools, it spread out to the courts, it spreads out to the hospital. So when you look at a victim and their journey, there are just about every single system that we have. It's a systems model, an ecological systems model, and it looks at every single system. And somewhere in that system, something is broken for a victim, because I really felt like the system had let me down. It had let me down. Something was broken in our system. And so we have to begin to look at each one of those systems, and that's part of the Howard County Coalition Lethality Assessment group that I am also a part of. As we look at mental health is also another crucial area, very crucial area. But those things, like what Lisa was saying, particularly with our children, their brains and things are being developed. You know, so it's part of that physiology, it's part of you know, they're maturing and they're growing. There is a proverb that says, the ruin of a nation begins in our homes. And so if a child is being brought up and they're seeing domestic violence, they're being exposed to it, then that's what they're going to know. So unless there is something to combat it, and so that's why we have to be out everywhere, touching at least one of the systems that we have to deal with each and every day. It's enough of us to cover every single system: education, medical, legal, court, all of it. But we got to get to work. Any other questions?
No more questions?
Wow.
Okay.
Did I do that well?
You
Is there no questions?
Hold on, we have one question and then we go break for lunch.
Oh, that's what it was. I was standing between you and lunch. Ah. Okay.
You mentioned that you dealt with your domestic violence for at least 23 years before you finally got out. I'm going to assume that most of those 23 years your children witnessed that.
Yes.
So once you got out, were you able to get the appropriate services for your children so that they're now competent adults?
Very good question. Yes, and actually what happened was the church that I grew up in, I ended up leaving that church and I ended up going to another church. And I never disclosed the domestic violence at the church because it was my family's church. I never disclosed it there. But at the new church that I went to, they were talking about all this stuff. And so I had the opportunity to talk to the pastor, who didn't hesitate. He didn't skip a beat. He was like, leave him. Leave him. But what that meant to me was, yes, be safe. Okay, so again, that's why I said just be careful of how you say things. But to me, because of my faith and again how I grew up, it was be safe, get out of the situation, separate yourself. So I was separated for 2 years. He was mandated to go to counseling as well, and I got counseling for my children. Yes, we were all in counseling. That was another part of my my healing process, that we all did go through counseling. And it's been a rough journey, you know, for my children of being witnessing it. And one of the things I just want to share is my oldest daughter, she must have been about 3 at the time. And as she got older, she asked me one day, she says, you remember that time when Daddy had you and he was beating you with a belt? I denied it to the ground. I was like, what are you talking about? That never happened. And she would always periodically come back and ask me that question until it finally clicked in my mind, oh, I know what she's talking about. And I could see it just as vividly. But because of that trauma, your mind has a way of shutting down of, what do you call it, repression, not suppression, repression. Too much trauma, too much, you know, whatever, that your psyche just couldn't handle it. And that's what's happening again to so many people. Because of the trauma, they may be acting out of whatever that trauma is. or they're acting out of what they don't remember, or maybe what they remember but did not understand it. So, but yes, they are, my daughter is now getting her master's. The second one is, she's writing a book. They're kind of following in my pathways in different ways, but they're doing well. And actually my son, who I never thought would be a elementary school assistant teacher, is actually a teacher. But thank you, you all have been an excellent audience.
For the speakers this morning, thank you all so much. I hope you will stay through our afternoon speakers. Everybody can take a lunch moment. However, I would like to introduce our County Council Chair, Todd Turner. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I just wanted to stop in and say, show my support for the conversation that's going on today, which is a very important conversation, not only for Prince George's County, for Maryland, but the country. And obviously, each of us has our role. At the County Council, for the past 3 fiscal years, we provided funding in the $500,000 range each year in order to build partnerships with those organizations in Prince George's County that provide services to victims of domestic violence and their children. And so I think that's one way that we as representatives of the county have tried to make sure that this issue is addressed as part of that. So I know it's been a competitive process. We've gotten a lot of applications, and there's still more work to do. And one of the things I appreciate is the fact of the partnership that we have working with the county through Community Crisis Services. I still have to get used to the name. We support housing, used to be St. Matthew's Housing, but providing some of those services and working with others in order for us to address this very serious problem. So I don't want to stand between you and lunch, but I do want to thank you for being here today, and I just wanted to show my support as well. Thank you.
And welcome to service this week. Ladies and gentlemen, I do apologize. We do have Pastor Stephen Price that will be getting the blessing for lunch. Please bow your head.
I've been overlooked by thousands. Please pray with me. Oh God, for many of us, this is a season of Lent and self-examination. We come to you in repentance that we have allowed domestic violence to affect our communities for so long. And in that repentance, we pledge ourselves to remove this reprehensible thing from our communities. Nurture us and fill us as we eat together and fellowship together, that we may fulfill this promise. By whatever name we call you, we know that you never advocate the pain of the vulnerable. So we come to you today. Amen.
I hope you all enjoyed the lunch. Everybody, please let's get a hand to Melissa Rodriguez, our neighbor at the level. Lieutenant Messi?
Yes. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lieutenant Maria Massey. I am the. Can you all hear me now?
Can we hear you? Let me hand this on to you.
Sure. Hello, hello. Better? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lieutenant Maria Massey. I am the commander for the Prince George's County Police Department's Domestic Violence Unit. Just a little bit about myself. I've been in the law enforcement family, been in policing for going on 14 years now. Started in patrol, was a detective, and got promoted up the ranks, and here I am today. So just to give you a little bit about domestic violence, I'm going to give you the law enforcement perspective. Our CID, our Criminal Investigations Division, took on the Domestic Violence Unit back in June of 2013. From there, we are here today. So we've been centralized in CID for going on 9 years now. 6 years now. With that being said, PGPD has always investigated domestic violence and domestic violence allegations,
It's just been centralized under past Chief Mark McGaugh. So just to give you a bit of a definition in reference to domestic violence, how we define domestic violence is that it is a pattern of behavior in which one person attempts to control an intimate partner through threats or actual use of physical violence, sexual assault, verbal and psychological abuse, and or economic coercion. A domestic violence incident is considered any crime where an individual has received deliberate physical injury or is in fear of imminent deliberate physical injury from an intimate partner. And how we define intimate partners here in the PGPD is that they can be defined as a spouse, whether they are residing together or not, a former spouse, whether they're residing together or not, or individuals who have a child in common, whether or not the victim and suspect have been married or have resided together at any time. Also, an intimate partner can be considered as any persons or persons who are currently involved or had a previous intimate relationship with each other, whether they are currently residing together or have ever resided together. This also includes same-sex relationships. Also, it kind of extends also into the familial aspect, brothers and sisters who live in the same household and things of that nature. The primary focus of our unit is to investigate cases where allegations of domestic abuse exist, make arrests where necessary, and provide the victim or victims with various resources to utilize at their disposal in an effort to ensure that the abuse does not continue. We have partnered with the Office of the Sheriff of Prince George's County, the Family Justice Center, and the CCSI in an effort to provide services for survivors of domestic violence. When officers respond to the reports of domestic violence and arrive on scene, there are several factors that they consider prior to calling us. Some of these factors are, is there evidence of a crime taking place? Are there injuries to one or more partners involved? Is the suspect still on scene, and etc. When they have gathered sufficient information and they have deduced that this is in fact an incident that meets the criteria for our domestic violence unit, they make contact with us. That, so to speak, is they'll call into the office, they'll page us over the radio, and we'll have an investigator or a detective respond to the scene to assess and take over the investigation. If an arrest is made on the scene, officers will make notification to our unit, as well as if a suspect is outstanding, notification is still made to our unit. All of our notifications are drafted up and sent out via email to various entities throughout our police department, as well as to our outside partners and agencies. Contact is made with the Family Justice Center, who follow up with the victim or victims and provide resources. These resources can extend to placement, employment resources, and the like. A lethality assessment form is also completed. There are several questions that when asked by the law enforcement officer or the police officer on scene, the victim can choose to answer. Based upon those questions that have been asked and answered, the victim may or may not screen in and speak with an advocate from the CCSI. From there, the victim is provided a multitude of resources by the patrol officers, as well as our partners at the CCSI, the Family Justice Center, and as well as from our domestic violence unit. The victim is able to obtain a protective order against the subject, obtain charging documents from the commissioner when the alleged crime is a misdemeanor, and can also ask for assistance from us here at the domestic violence unit. Some of our success stories that we've had since my promotion and assignment to this unit have been as it relates to domestic violence, obviously. One of our success stories that comes to mind is a few months back, there was a shooting in our Suitland area. The boyfriend and girlfriend were in a domestic dispute, and it escalated to where the suspect, her boyfriend, shot into the house, but ended up striking her mother. The mother, in turn, ended up falling on top of her 4-year-old grandchild, breaking his leg. So you can imagine, it was a very intense and dramatic scene. So one of the things that we did, we went in there, we investigated, we got charges, and thankfully this person was apprehended a few days later. But one of the things that we did was that we attempted to remove all family members from that location because we did not have that suspect in custody. And that's one of the things that our Family Justice Center does. They can move individuals from different places, i.e. safe houses, or other places to include hotels and motels until that suspect is apprehended and brought to justice. One of the other things we can do is that when we have the individuals in our custody, we attempt to try to interview them. Whether or not that suspect cooperates is, it just depends on the situation. Sometimes they choose to make a confession, sometimes they choose to invoke their rights, which they're legally obligated to do. There's a process, as there is in everything concerning law enforcement. The suspect has a court date, and the victim will show up to court and testify on his or her behalf as a victim, and then it goes to trial,
and then it goes to the court system as far as sentencing and processing. One of the things that I do try to urge our victims to do is continue with the process. One of the biggest things that I've heard here today is that it is a process, and it is. To some of our victims, it can seem lengthy, but I try to assure them that in the end, it's for their benefit. We have several different types of protective orders. We have our interim protective order, our temporary protective order, and our final protective order. What I've seen a lot of times is that the victim will go and obtain the interim protective order, or a partner with our family justice center will go and get that with them and for them, not for them, but with them. And what will end up happening is the victim won't come to court for various different reasons. Once that victim doesn't come to court, and I say this so that you can stress it to your resources and your partners, is that protective order is dropped. It is null and void. I know that to some people a protective order may seem just like a piece of paper, but it is a document that is used to protect that victim. Once that protective order is dropped, you have to start all over again to start the process back up to obtain a protective order. And yes, we know that there are different circumstances. I couldn't get a right to court. I was unable to, but you have to at least try and at least stress it to your resources, at least to help the victims as much as they possibly can. Are there any questions? I kept it short and sweet for everybody. Yes, sir.
What's the percentage of violation of a protective order?
I don't have that exact number, but the percentage I would say is high. And I'll say this, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. What ends up happening is that the victim will get the protective order, and they'll reconcile, and they'll allow them to come back in. That's a violation. Whether the victim allows it or not, it's still a violation. So a lot of the reconciliation part, it's pretty much constant, if that makes any sense. You're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
When you have to remove the victim and children from the home because the perpetrator is on the loose, and you end up getting a protective order against the perpetrator, does that protective order also cover the children who may go to school where the perpetrator knows that they're
So long as you put that child or those children on that protective order, they are in part a part of that protective order as well. Yes, ma'am.
I've done work with my clients that they have experienced coming in on this situation, but because they presented themselves, they ended up in prison too. How do you determine different
So her question was that she has a lot of experience in her career where the victim ends up being arrested with the suspect. So what we try to do in the domestic violence unit, we urge officers to not arrest both parties. However, every so often there is a mutual combatant situation when it is hard to prove who the aggressor was. Does anybody else have any other questions?
How does that work?
Lee?
If that was working,
Hi there. If you could turn this mic up just a little bit, that would be great. Do you want on stage?
and that way this one can be easier.
Siri comes in and takes over.
Speak into it.
Can you hear me now?
Thank you, lady. Any other questions?
So we can hear the question.
Who else? Roseanne?
Her question was, I can repeat it if I get it right. Her question was that she's had, in her experience, she's had victims be arrested as well as a suspect in scenes of domestic violence when the officers can respond out to the call for service. And what I explained to her is that on the occasion, it may be hard for the officers arriving on scene first to prove who the aggressor was. Maybe they're both not cooperating, maybe they said, no, he hit me, no, she hit me, and things of the like. What we do try to do in the domestic violence unit, we try to get it out there to our patrol officers to try to steer away from arresting both parties. But on the occasion, it is hard to prove who the aggressor was or is.
Okay, Lydia. Okay, can anybody raise their hand just right there? Lydia has a question.
That's me. once again, I just spoke about, we talk about all the community, I know there is a lot of domestic violence within the community, within the women are women, and some of them might not have papers, they're going to be undocumented. Can you speak about how is the process and how can those victims can be protected by law?
So just from a personal experience, when I graduated from the academy, my patrol station was Hyattsville, and I was assigned to Langley Park, whereupon in our calls for service, the concern was that we don't want to make calls for service. We don't want the police here because we may be undocumented. And what I've always tried to explain to them is that we're here for the call for service. We're not here for, your current residency or your citizenship, so to speak. One of the things that we do try to tell everybody is coming forward is that you have to come forward so that we can look into the matter and investigate. And just for instance, we had another situation where there was an individual, it was a domestic violence, and it was a domestic related abduction of a child. What ended up happening was he took the child from the mom. The child is not his biologically, however, they were still involved in a relationship. What ended up happening was that we came out, we responded, and I don't believe that she was documented, but that wasn't our concern. Our concern was this child and the safety of this child and bringing this child back home. So that was one of the instances where I can say where the residency or the citizenship, is of no concern to us at that moment because we're trying to assist. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Any more questions? No? Hey. We have one over here? Hello. Could you tell us what happens when the perpetrator violates protective order? What's the intervention on the part of the police?
So this is where we ask for the individual or the victim's help. When the perpetrator violates a protective order, the protective order is very specific about what you can and cannot do, and it's more can't than can. You shall not contact this person. You shall not go to their place of employment. You shall not go to the school where their kids are. You shall not harass them. You shall not go down the street where they live or go to the house. There are a lot of different shall nots in there. For every single instance that happens, it is imperative that everybody calls into our emergency phone number, 911, or our non-emergency number and place the call for service. 9 times out of 10, it's difficult for us to assist when you don't tell us what's going on. So what happens is that for every instance, you call us. If we come out and that person is still in the area when we're canvassing and looking, we'll take them right then and there for violation. You can also go to the commissioner, or the victim is advised to go to the commissioner and let the commissioner know that this person has violated the protective order. That's an additional violation that goes against them for the protective order. I'm sorry, say that again?
Do you have any questions? I want to thank you for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it and following up on stuff. Is there a way in which we can invite you to other programs in our community to talk to some of the groups here? Because it seems to me that we need a wider audience for this kind of thing, and I would hope that this would just be a first step.
Oh, absolutely. Mr. Larry Bill has all of my contact information. He's more than welcome to call me directly or just send me an email. If I'm able to, I'll more than likely come out. I have no problem with that at all. I'd love to speak to everybody more in depth about the process and, even have some of my investigators come out and talk to you about some of their experiences as investigators. That'd be great.
Simply send me an email and ask for information, and I'm happy to go ahead and forward that to you.
Yeah. Any more questions before I go take my seat? Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, the next speaker is also a policeman from the Prince George's County Sheriff's Department, and I promised him that I would not embarrass either one of us by trying to pronounce his name. So, I give you Lieutenant Upakam. See what I mean?
Good afternoon, can you hear me? Okay. The lieutenant went over a lot of definitions and a lot of things with domestic violence, very similar with us. We are partner agencies of domestic violence. So I'll go over brief stuff that the sheriff's office is involved in within the community. I am lieutenant, been on 15 years. I'm one of the commanders in our domestic violence intervention division. We currently operate throughout the entire Prince George's County, so we cover the whole entire county. Our unit is responsible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to respond to emergency 911 calls in the Police District 3 area, which is Landover, Suitland, Forestville, those areas. Our unit is also responsible for serving all court-issued peace and protective orders. Is that me? Okay. So we're responsible for serving all court-issued peace and protective orders. You might, they're the same things, people might call them a restraining order. It's the same type of thing. And we also are responsible for, can you guys still hear me? I can speak loud. Can you guys hear me? It's really hard. Really hard in this room. Bring the mic down. Bring the mic down. Okay, how about now? There we go. All right, good. So not only are we responsible for responding to emergency 911 calls, we're also responsible for serving throughout the county all the peace and protective orders, and we're also responsible for handling domestic standbys. That's where we escort either the victim or the offender to the house to gather their belongings because they have to leave. In addition to that, in our unit, our DVID unit, we also have what is called the Community Service Special Victims Advocate Unit. What that is, it's a specially trained unit within the Sheriff's Office. It's 10 of them that assist victims with going to court, going through the court process. They might attend court with them, might help them get placement in a safe home, and help them prepare safely how to leave the domestic violence situation. So we also have that program within the Sheriff's Office. So pretty much a lot of similar things with our partner agency. We do a good job combining so we can, basically help all the citizens of Prince George's County. So that's a brief synopsis of what we do. So I know there's supposed to be a Q&A, but I can stand for questions if there's any questions. Yes, ma'am.
I am here. And who has a question?
How do you police your police officers who are perpetrators?
That's a very good question. They're no different. They're not handled any differently than anybody else. If they're involved in a domestic violence situation, it's investigated the same way. And depending on the initial call, they might be placed on an immediate suspension pending the investigation of the case. They're no different. They don't get any special treatment. It's handled the same way. We take it very seriously.
Do they go to the abuse intervention program?
I'm sorry?
Do they go to an abuse intervention program before coming back on duty?
Yeah, that might be something that happens in the process that our internal affairs deals with. It depends, what they handle. Yes, sir, in the back.
Okay. Pastor Grace.
We recently had legislation that says that a perpetrator is not allowed to keep a firearm in the home. How is that being enforced?
So you might be referring to what a couple of months ago was released, which is the Emergency Risk Protective Order. Commonly, you might hear it as an ERPO. So when those are issued, a call for service might go out. We might respond to it, or the police department might respond to it. If there's allegations of firearms being involved or threatened, we'll advise them that they need to go get what's called an Emergency Risk Protective Order. That order will come out and it will strictly state that we have to serve that individual and recover all firearms from him. So again, that goes on top of our workload as far as protective orders and peace orders, as we also serve ERPOs. Don't hold me to this number. In my last CompStat meeting, I believe as of March, we served around 52 ERPOs and recovered 42 guns and over 10,000 rounds of ammunition.
Maybe?
I know, people get tired. He's like, okay, good. One of the reasons I'm speaking because I was a survivor, I was married to a police officer, I experienced all of this. That's what is touching my heart so much, and that's why I have to speak. Yes, just in general, he did have firearms, he threatened to kill me, and they did the same thing. They went, they got the warrant, another warrant, the protected order, I got a protected order. I was treated the same as another citizen. Not because he was a police officer, he was protected. He might be protected from other sides of the police officer in DC, but not in the county, Prince County. So I felt very secure, safe, very safe once everything was presented to him. I just wanted to bring that up so you can share that to others.
Do we have any other questions? No? I would like you all to join me in giving a round of applause to the law enforcement of Prince George's County and the state of Maryland. They do their very level best to protect us every single day, and we should be appreciative. Okay, where did Brenda go? Barbara. I'd like to hand the mic for just a moment to Barbara Daly from the governor's office. And I'm chasing her.
So good afternoon to everyone here. My name is Barbara Darling. I'm in charge of youth services for Governor Holden. So it's a pleasure to be here. First of all, I'm a Southerner, so thanks for all the great food. Usually I'm at events where there's lunch on your own, so that was very helpful today. This year, the governor does, I want you all to know that he cares about domestic violence and victims. General, to give you a little bit of information, he caught me getting my teeth. So, last year, the state of Maryland served 500,000 victims. We spent $170 million statewide services for grants, $50 million directly related to victim services. In 2017, more specifically, the PG County had over 1,711 incidents of domestic violence. Currently, PG County has 80 grants that are offered by the governor's office in which we serve victims in some way, shape, or form. One of the things I want to say, thank you for having an event. It's nice to see people of such a culturally diverse age, socioeconomic, lay people, church people, law enforcement. It is an awesome opportunity, merging faith in the DV. One of the things I want to say, I want to caution us with, we're using the term domestic violence, and I get that, but for the last 25 years, let me give you a little history about me. So I'm a transplant from South Carolina. And so what that means to me is domestic violence was even worse because coming from that southern culture, you're just a good girl and you don't talk about it. So it's even worse in that culture. But a little bit about my background and the reason I was chosen for this position is that having a background in criminal justice and in law, working with victims, but more specifically, I work with perpetrators probably more than victims. And so the reason I think I'm a good fit for this is we've got to look at domestic violence in a balanced manner. I know this is faith-based, but one of the things I found with the churches is that you've got to be trained in domestic violence. You cannot simply give information to people that can cause more harm than good. And I'm going to give you an example from the church in which I served back in South Carolina, and I thought it was pretty evolved. And I went to my pastor one day at the church and I said, the lady that was sitting by me in church, she was crying, she was broken, and I think there's domestic violence going on. She, alluded to it. So he went and called her husband and said, he wasn't trying to be, this is my point. I checked on her husband said she's fine. And I said, Pastor, let me explain something to you about domestic violence. I said, that's why the church and everybody, you have to be trained. If she's in I'm just gonna be honest. God has never been in my family, my family has never gone to church, I don't know anything about it, so I can't understand that perspective. You gotta have a perspective where you're coming to people without the religiousness, if you will, as a good person, showing them who God is through your actions, but not beating them over the head and telling them, you should do this and you should do that. I understand we are faith-based. I'm a woman of faith. But the reason I think I've been successful in dealing even with perpetrators is that I meet them where they are. Let's talk about what's going on with you. If there's any way that they're going to get better, you don't have to come to them from a position of understanding. It doesn't mean that you can know what they're doing. If you start with the judgment of you've lost them. They can go to 26 weeks, they can go to classes for a year. I've taught classes for 15 years, and I'll tell you, the success is not in your education. I don't care what you do, I don't care what you understand. You cannot relate to these people, you can forget it. If you don't understand, I have people come to me, they don't want to deal with me because I'm a woman. They don't want to deal with me because I'm African American. They don't want to deal with me. Who are you to tell me? So you got to overcome some of that, and you simply just have to let it be. When you're starting to do this and address these things, they may not like you, they may not ever like you, but you have to not put the victim in danger. You have to understand. So I the gaps in services. That's my job. My job is not to run the shelters. My job is not to tell the agencies what to do and how to do it. My job is to say, what's wrong? Why are these victims not being served? What do we need to do? And generally what that translates to is that we are the representative of the state of Maryland, meaning we're the state administrative agency. The grant funding, the federal funding comes through us. So what that means is that people make applications to us. We create grants based on needs. So if you come to me and PG County has a need that's unique or something that's already out there, then my way of helping you is A, putting you in touch with who you need to be in touch with, and B, if there's a funding source for you to direct you in that area. So that's all I can say. I appreciate you guys. This has been an awesome event. I am stuck. I don't have to go right in and get some leave before I go home. And God bless y'all. And I apologize. I don't have cards because my card came wrong and it's in the back. However, if you go to GOCCP, which is the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Control, that's our division on the governor's site. Some other sites that may be, I heard you guys talk about Maryland 211. Please use Maryland 211. There's a lot of information on there. And MD Courts, if you go to mdcourts.com, it talks about the restraining orders, it talks about the court process, it talks about domestic violence at length, and that's a good service. So call us if you need to, and you'll be able to get in touch with us through the agency here. They'll have all that information. It's been my pleasure, and
Thank you, Mother. Okay, we have a couple more speakers today. The next one is somebody that is very special to Community Crisis Services. This young lady has utilized the services of our state passenger shelter, and we'd like to welcome up to the stage Roxanne Johnson. Of course. Actually, my videographer is telling me that for him to be able to get your
Please, want your information out there.
Okay. Can I come up here a little bit from right here? Because I like to be on the ground. I'm on the ground kind of, yeah, right? My name is Reverend Roxanne Johnson. I bring greetings from Hope and Healing Christian Counseling Services. This afternoon, I just want to talk, I'm a mental health therapist. Have, about 3 or 4 jobs, but that's neither here nor there. But one of the jobs that I do, I work with families in the community. We do community-based services. And I'd like to talk to you first anecdotally, then we can talk about those statistics, right? I had a family of 4, mom, 35-year-old woman, 3 children, one 11, one 15, the other one 17. Mom was abused by her common law husband over periods of time, was almost cut her carotid artery, missed by a couple of inches, was found by her youngest child lying in a pool of blood. She was taken to the hospital. The perpetrator was arrested and is now doing jail time. I got involved because they needed mental health services. The little boy was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. The middle child was diagnosed with trauma and depression disorder. The oldest child was also diagnosed with trauma and finally found out that she actually had bipolar disorder. And I'm saying all of this because, and then the mom was clinically depressed to the point that she could not get out of her bed to support her family from this incident. And I'm saying all of that to say, there's mental health component to this, okay? And the very people that we don't think are affected the most. The young man, the little boy, missed almost 2/3 of his school year because of his post-traumatic stress disorder, having nightmares of seeing his mom lying in a pool of blood. The oldest child couldn't go to places where there was a crowd because in that it triggered her about the experience of all the ambulances and the police officers and things like that. So yeah, there's a mental health component when we have domestic violence. So that's one anecdotal story. Another one that I'd like to give you is when I had the opportunity to work as a substance abuse therapist, substance use counselor. I had a young lady who had just come out of 30 days of being inpatient for alcoholism. Started seeing her for mental health services because the thing about with substance use, there's usually some trauma in there somewhere, right? And so she started talking about trauma when she was a little girl. She's 30 plus years old. But she can remember being a little girl, and they used to call her dad, her and her siblings would call her dad Freddie from Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm like, what? Really? Why would you call your dad Freddie from Nightmare on Elm Street? She told me that every Friday night, like clockwork, her dad would turn into Freddie from Nightmare on Elm Street, and if all the kids knew that when that happened, that they would go to their hiding place. Her hiding place was in the bathtub. And the reason she hid in the bathtub because after her father beat up on her mother, he would then go to try to beat up on his own children. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about mental health. From those very people who are the witnesses to this, may even be affected, may have even been perpetrated against themselves. Statistics. Now I'll talk a little bit about statistics. The Center for Disease Control says that 45 to 60%, there's a 45 to 60% chance of co-occurring mental health issues for children who are witnessing or actually being perpetrated against because of violence. And that means just because they may not have actually seen the incident, they hear the yelling, the screaming, the energy that's created in a negative environment over and over and over again, because you do realize that there's a cycle in this thing, and the police may only get involved when it's escalated to the point where somebody gets caught on fire and somebody gets shot or stabbed, but it's escalating. These children are also don't do well in school. How can they? They have problems, they have anxiety, they have depression. A lot of them, it's almost like being a witness to a war. It's the same kind of things that we see of people who have been witnessing to over time in a war zone. The same kind of thing. Children who are seen in domestic violence, some of the things that you may see in them, if you're an educator or if you work with children. The children in preschool, young children who witness intimate partner violence, they start doing things they used to do when they were younger. They have aggression. They start wetting the bed. They start sucking their thumb, increased crying and whining. They may also develop difficulty falling or staying asleep and show signs of terror, such as suffering or hiding, or showing signs of severe separation anxiety. School-age children, children in the age range may feel guilty about the abuse. They may think that it's their fault that their father acted like Freddie, and blame themselves for it. Domestic violence and abuse hurts children's self-esteem, their sense of self-worth. They may not participate in school activities or get good grades, have fewer friends than others, and get into trouble often. Everybody that's a behavior problem in school is not a behavior problem, but it's just an outward acting out for something else that's going on. What's the something else that's going on? They also may have a lot of headaches and stomach aches. Then the teens who witness abuse may act out in negative ways, such as fighting with family members or skipping school. They may also engage in risky behaviors, such as having unprotected sex and using drugs and alcohol. They may have low self-esteem and have trouble making friends. They may start fights or bully others and are more likely to get in trouble with the law. This type of behavior is more common in teen boys, but we're now seeing, I do have the opportunity to also partner with the Prince George's County school system, and I work in a number of middle schools and a couple of elementary schools. In the middle schools, we're seeing teenage girls coming to school with knives, having gang-style fights. This is coming from somewhere. This behavior is not, they just start doing it one day. It's because they see it. They see that aggressive behavior being played out somewhere, oftentimes in their family of origin. So what do we do as a community? We need to have comprehensive services. Just like when a police officer comes out, there needs to be a mental health, a crisis unit that goes out with them to make sure that family is stabilized and then gets continuous care. We as a community, whether it be in the church community, synagogue, whatever faith community, we need to embrace people who are having those issues. Like the sister back there said, not hitting them over the head with the religion, but coming to them because the word that I know says to love your neighbor as yourself. And if my neighbor is hurting, then I need to find out what's going on with my neighbor and how I can be of service. So I just thought by today, just to give you a little bit about the mental health component in this thing. It's very intrinsic and it's very deep. And a lot of times, even the battler himself or herself has come from an environment where they learned that. They didn't just pick it up off the street. No. They came from an environment where that was acceptable behavior to beat on your wife or beat on your husband. Whatever was accepted as part of the relationship dynamic. So we have to even teach people to unteach them about the wrong way to do things and teach them about the healthy way to do things. Amen? All right. Anybody have any questions?
My name is AJ. I'm assistant for Arnold Place. Arnold Place is opening up a new transitional home for homeless women affected by DV and human trafficking. We had an open house, and a young lady, she was a senior citizen, she came by, and it became I don't know what you kind of call it, a session where she really poured into sharing her story that she had. It had really tore her up from the inside out. She had that story for 40 years. 40 years. She told us about how she had gone through drugs and all these other kind of behaviors to kind of really suppress that story. So what you saying is very real. Not just a every. That's not like how it's for 40 weeks. Amazing.
And the mental health component to it is real. And trauma is real. You know, some of us try to sweep trauma under the rug, but how many know that if you keep sweeping something under the rug, sooner or later you're going to fall over that thing, and you're going to deal with it or it's going to deal with you.
I want to thank you for coming out, and I would love for you to come out to our school. When we're at middle school, we have a diverse population, over 1,200 scholars, plus we have 20 different languages. So we got kids coming from different regions of the world, and a lot of them have experienced trauma where they've seen their family members killed right there. And also you have the different religions. So we deal with a lot. And for them to hear it from someone else, and like you said, that mental health is real. Because we experience as educators, dealing with these kids, these experiences come out. If you tell them to do something, they're ready to attack you. And if you don't understand that component of where that's coming from, and you come out the wrong way, then there's going to be some serious issues. So we're going to that side of mental health because we all have that side. It's just a matter of who's going to trigger it. So we need that help. So thank you for being here and everyone else because it touches you everywhere. You just got to cover yourself. I thank you again also for sharing this information. And a couple of things that have been sticking out to me. One is about having this conversation, like that old adage of what happens in the house stays in the house. We know that has to go out the window. There's so many people that are in pain because of trauma. I had a conversation with a friend of mine just the other day, and we're in our 40s, and it's just now taking her right now to late 40s to say, this is what happened to me when I was younger. And I said, you know what you described as domestic violence? And she said, and at first, I said, was your parents in a domestic violence situation? At first, she said no. But as she continued talking, it was exactly that. When she said, we had to literally grab pillowcases and run out the house because of what was going on. And so my thing was, again, I reiterated, I said, so you were in a domestic violence situation. And she said, you know what, we were. And she's just now getting help. And so sometimes we don't understand, like you said, when it simmers, and we are unhealed, right? We don't understand how that can manifest.
And it manifests in ways that may be unbeknownst to us, or even as unintentionally, the way we parent or the way we talk about relationships and things of that nature, our children are picking those things up. And so we have to continue to have these conversations even outside of this arena, because this is a start, but it's not a finish. We have to go back now and take it back to our communities, whether that's your faith-based community, whether that's your home, right? Whether that, I have teenage kids, they're 18 and 16 years old, and I'm talking to them about this because guess what? Like my sister said here, it's starting with those 16-year-olds, 16 to 24. And as I'm paying attention to the relationship she's in, I'm having to point some things out to her that do not sound right. Every time you're on the phone, you're always saying, are you okay? Are you all right? And I begin to talk to her about it, I'm understanding this young man is going through some trauma. But she's ill-equipped to deal with the trauma. You're his friend, not his counselor. So how do we, and I know a lot of our young ladies especially, they like to be able to help and to coach and sometimes they find themselves in situations that they're unequipped to really deal with. So I'm just admonishing people to really continue to have this conversation outside of today, because we've got to start talking to our little people, even from elementary school on up. And then we ourselves, if we really are honest and we really begin to think back to our own selves, are we in this healing process? Are we on this healing journey? And you don't have to own it to anybody else, but with your own self, are we on a healing journey? And it really starts with each and every last one of us. So thank you.
Did you have any other questions? Yes, sir. I'm on my way. No, you're pretty quiet, usually.
Can you hear me now? Before today, I really did not realize the extent of abuse, of domestic violence. Is that better? I did not realize the extent of domestic violence. I mean, this has been a wide open experience for me, and I think the work being done is terrific from all the different groups that have talked today. And what occurs to me is that this is really a societal issue. It has to do with the socialization of children, and I don't know how we begin to address that, but I think that's really important to be first talking and getting it out there, and then looking at how do we bring changes in how children are raised and how they are socialized, whereas males are not raised to think it's okay to be abusive toward women, and women likewise to know what their rights are, and everyone should have respect for everyone else who is a human being. And that to me is a big societal issue, has to do with education, has to do with the churches, and I don't really know how you begin to get that at the core. But that has to change. You have to change it so children are not growing up being taught at home how they will treat males and females. Anyway, that's my thought on this today.
Thank you, Kevin. Anyone else? Anybody else? Yes.
It's not a question this time, it's just a comment. If any of you are homeowners in Prince George's County, you know that when you do your annual taxes, that a portion of your taxes is designated to support parks and planning. All of the programs that we talked about today cost money. I suggest that you talk with your council person, whoever that may be, and get the word out that we need to designate a specific portion of our taxes to support these programs. Otherwise, we're just spinning our wheels because there's not enough money in the pot right now to go around to support these programs. That's my say.
Joe, anything else? Anybody else? Oh, I'm sorry.
Anybody else? No? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, while we had planned on Jolene Ivy being with us today, unfortunately she did have an emergency and she had to go out of town. However, I am very proud to introduce her husband,
Prince George's County, Glenn Ivy. Come on up, Glenn. Glenn and Jolene have been wonderful supporters of community crisis services and domestic violence services in Prince George's County for many years, and we are very honored to have them speak with us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. I want to commend you all, first of all, for putting on this program. Whoever put this together, and I know that usually it's somebody's already out of the room because they're working, doing the next thing that somebody else is supposed to be doing. Thank you for doing it. I also want to thank all of you all who showed up today. I mean, when I pulled up, it's a spectacular day outside. It's like 70 degrees, 75 degrees. The first really great one we've had, I think. There are other things you could be doing. I think the fact that you're here is really something you should be commended for, because this is a heavy lift. Actually, I was like Kathy when I got elected state's attorney. I knew there were certainly crime issues in Prince George's County, and I'd been a federal prosecutor before, so I was familiar with a lot of the things. That was in D.C., and just so you know, that was the middle of the crack epidemic. That was the early 90s. So we had, D.C. was averaging 450 to 500 homicides a year. I knew there were problems, we were dealing with those. But when I got elected here, there are some things I didn't know. And I didn't realize that the domestic violence problem was as widespread as it was. I've heard statistics here and there and everything, but once I got out in the community, and especially when I started going to churches and talking to people there, that's when it really hit me. People would come up and talk to me, just like in environments like this, and they would tell their stories about what had happened to them and how difficult it was to survive. But more importantly, they would talk about the problems that they had in getting support. And I don't just mean in financial services. We talked about programs to help fund things, and the community, the Family Crisis Center is always short funded, and all those sorts of things. We need to talk about this. And yes, you're right, man. We definitely define revenue streams that fund these programs in an adequate way, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But what I didn't realize was, A, how widespread this was, and B, how damaging it was. Because when I got to the case where, I'd sit down on Wednesdays and we'd look at all the homicides that had come in that week. And we'd review it, the police department would come in, my homicide department, and we'd start looking at it. And a lot of times you peel the onion back and say, well, how did this guy get to the point where he shot 3 people? When first week I was in office, there was a triple murder at a strip club that no longer exists, across the street from where I shot, the giant that I shot at. And I was like, wow, where in the world did this come from? But when you looked at what was behind it for this guy, somebody who blocked his view at the strip club, okay, I know, you don't want to block anybody's view, but triple murder, how did we get there? But when you started looking at it, domestic violence was a piece, struggling in school was a piece. There were red flags all through this guy's childhood that nobody had paid attention to. And so one of the things I think we need to do is look at not only the survivor side, but the batterer side, and how can we intervene early? One of the reasons we reached out to the faith community, actually, I'll tell you a quick story about this. I'd come up, and I didn't put 2 and 2 together, actually, until I was just thinking about it a minute ago. I was a kid, I grew up, first Rocky Mount, North Carolina, then moved to Northern Virginia, and lived near a Lutheran pastor. And he'd come out, he had sons about my age, we used to play together, and kids went to school together and all this stuff. Moved away, went to school, came up, lived in Prince George's County, bumped into one of them not that long ago. I was still in office, actually. And she told me that her dad, the pastor, had been verbally and physically abusing his wife all of those years. And I had no idea. As far as I know, my family didn't know, my parents didn't know, nobody on the block knew. But as it turned out, that family didn't feel like they had any place to go to, even though they were the head of the church in the neighborhood, in our community. Even though they had friends, all of them. We've got to make sure that we find a way to give them an outlet and support. And one of the things that we did when I was state's attorney was to try and reach out to the faith community to do that. Because here in Prince George's County, we have over 900 churches. We have a huge congregation. If you add everybody together, you go visit someplace else and see if you can find as many and as large churches as we have here in Prince George's County. And the resources are extraordinary. Extraordinary for some of these churches. You got churches here where pastors have their own jet. Right? You got churches here where the president comes out and looks and he's like, wow, this is a big church. Because it's really that big. My son that did Lion King on Broadway, I took him to visit one of these churches. The sound and video system there was better than the Broadway theater that he did the show with. We've got churches like that. So, and I had a case that popped up. A woman had been a member of a church. Her boyfriend had gotten mad at her, she left. He got abusive, that's why she left. She reached out to the church. They didn't really support her. Matter of fact, maybe we should talk about this too, I don't know. But they said, you know, you need to try and work it out. Yeah, you need to stay in the marriage. The man is the head of the household. I apologize if I'm crossing any line. You got to submit to his authority, et cetera, et cetera. So she went back. He got upset. One day he came home from work. He killed her in the living room. And then when the two kids came home from school, they discovered mom in a pool of blood there in the house, and he committed suicide afterwards. Both of their parents were laying on the living room floor dead. And so I started talking to one of the family members, and she was like, they were both members of the church, both active in the church. She had reached out to the church. How do we end up with two dead people and two kids coming home from school and discovering the bodies? And everybody's shocked, like they didn't know what was going on. So we started talking, and I'm not going to call the name of the church, all right? So we started talking, and one of the things we figured out was, it was recommended to me actually, can you reach out to the faith community and ask them to discuss this openly and directly? And so this is like, I don't know, 2003, 2004. So great, we'll reach out to the churches, they'll be all over this, right? We'll call it Safe Sunday. I'll go talk to the pastors. I've got a great relationship with them. So we go reach out to the churches, starting with the mega churches. All right? Pastor. I didn't even start with the pastor. One to come correct, so I started to like the lieutenants, and we'll work our way up. Even though I knew the pastors, we'll work our way up. Okay, well, how about this? Well, the lieutenants were like, that's a great idea. Hey, maybe we could actually get some of the churches to work together. So instead of each church having to replicate a support and bureaucratic and administrative structure and wasting money, why don't we all do it together? Okay, we take it to the pastors. No movement. No movement. No movement. So I call a meeting. The guys, all the lieutenants come. Okay, Mr. Adams, we'll take it back. No movement. So I start going to the pastors personally. Like, what is the deal? Well, brother, you didn't go to theology school. You went to law school. So I don't come and tell you how to practice law. Don't come in here telling me how to run my church. That's a quote, okay? So I'm like, I don't know what I did wrong here, but this is obviously not the right way to go about it. But guess what? The mid-sized churches and the smaller churches were like, okay, yeah, we'll give this a shot. So here's what happened. We did a first Safe Sunday, and I had this like magician media guy. And he got NBC4 to come out on a Sunday morning, and they filmed it live. We were outside in the parking lot of the church. African American church, not much bigger than this one. Guess what happened? I started getting phone calls because the women, and by the way, this is women. This is women asserting their power because y'all control Prince George's County. So they go to their pastor and they say, well, You know, we heard this thing about Project Safe Sunday. How come we were not part of this? Not accusatory, they're seeking information, right? Well, guess what? The next year we did, I had those same pastors who were like, no, brother, I be staying in your lane. They're calling us to ask, hey, can we get on board with this? Now, let me confess, the story doesn't have the perfect ending because it didn't go as far as it could have and should have. In fact, one of the things I think we need to get back to is leaning on the bigger churches to do more. Because they have enormous resources that can make a huge difference here in the county. And the other piece is, it's not just Prince George's County, right? So if you look at churches, the Lutherans have a system, United Methodists have a system, Catholic Church has a system, AMEs, Baptists, all of them have national and international structures. There's no reason that domestic violence should only be a focus in Prince George's County. Women and children are getting abused all over the world. All over the world, this should be a mission of the church. It should be a top priority of the church. And we've got to make that happen by starting at the grass level. So one of the things I find so exciting about events like this is that this is how it starts to happen. This is how we build it and make it work. So a couple quick things. One is if there's a way to find sort of an outgrowth structure, you know, to build, to network, and to get other churches involved. They might also be, they might be other Lutheran, they might be churches of Bowie, that whatever it is. And you know, you might be doing this. If you're already doing it, I apologize, but the more we can do, the better, because there's strength in numbers. And the more people we reach from these churches, the more lives we can intervene in, and the more people we can save before it's too late. So I'd encourage you all to continue what you're doing, but to share it, to build it out, to reach out to other churches and get them on the track with you, and to send the message out to them. There's a way to do this. I mean, for one quick example. I started asking pastors to preach a sermon about domestic violence. Now, half of them just were automatically, no, I'm not taking that up. Now, some of them would say, well, you know, we've already got the annual structure where, you know, there's a passage of the Bible that every Sunday it's already laid out years in advance. So I got to stay on that track. And I was like, wow, okay. Because I know I visited some churches that have that. And like if there's a major event, somehow they manage to either depart and talk about the major event, or they can connect it to the scripture, right? So for that crowd, I said, okay, well, if you don't want to preach a sermon about it, you know, do a little like when you're doing announcements, because you don't just get up there and do the sermon and go home, right? Speak about it. Can you find a space? A lot of them wouldn't do it. And I had one pastor come up to me and say, you know, I don't want to do it because I don't know how to do it. That's good. I came through divinity school. We didn't talk about it there. We don't have passages that I can turn to and find. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, well, you know, you have Google? You know, you can Google, you get whatever, New International, King James, I mean, there's all kinds of versions. But I said, okay, fine, so we'll get other pastors. Hey, so brother, Ephesians 5. Pull up Ephesians 5, 1 Corinthians 13. I mean, they're all over the place. So we started putting it out. Okay, well here, you can have these. Take a look at these. This might help you get there. Something that, and there were churches that picked it up based on that. Rachel Tamar was another. You know, where a pastor was like, you know, I could link this in. Find any way you can to support the building out of this effort. And then let me leave the church for a moment and talk about politics and money. I know. Man, it gets a little dicey, especially. No, you're not supposed to talk politics. I'm not going to talk electoral politics, at least not explicitly. But I want to come back to a point that I made just a couple minutes ago. In Prince George's County, black women decide who the next elected official is going to be. Pretty much, right? So if you look, county executive, state's attorney, my wife and other members of the county council, African American women. And in communities where it's not the black women making the pick, white women drive it too, right? Here's the thing. Well, it's true nationally too. I mean, I won't get, I'm not gonna, let me be careful about how I say this, but in the last presidential election, white women determine who the next president will be. Bottom line, right? Here's the thing for women generally. Women put everything ahead of themselves, right? So a lot of just, we'll go to the micro for a second. A lot of times domestic violence survivors, women, would not leave. They would take the beat over and over and over again until he threatened the kids. Then she would do, okay, I gotta do something now. I said, well, okay, I get that. Well, here's one that really that made me really start thinking about it. A lot of times women would leave when he threatened the pet. Right? He's gonna hurt the dog. So she's gonna protect the dog. That's not certain. So like, well, that's fine. I love animals, I love dogs too, but why would she allow him to abuse her and stay in there? But when he threatens the dog, then she's ready to act. And it's not because, it's because there are a lot of women, especially the way people have been raised up here in the States, they put everybody else first. The kids come first. Sometimes even the batterer comes first. Well, I must have done something to upset him, like that. They will defend him. Ladies, it's time. It's time to put yourselves first. It really is. And domestic violence can be elevated to a top political issue if you decide to do it. It can happen in the next cycle if you decide to do it. And here's how you do it. So you go to campaign for political events or campaign forums or whatever. Delegate so-and-so, Senator so-and-so, Council Congressman so-and-so, what are you doing to address domestic violence issues? What steps are you taking trying to address this? Now here's what's going to happen. For most of them, unless they're in law enforcement, they're going to freeze. They're going to freeze because it's not a top issue. They're not ready to talk about it. They'll be supportive, right? But it's just not really on the agenda. They can talk about Afghanistan. They can talk about, you name the issue, healthcare, for guns and all. But this one, we haven't forced it to become a top level issue. But we can and we should. Number one. Number two, take a look, just by comparison. Think about the gay rights movement, right? So gay rights movement, when I was a kid, in fact, I was just watching a movie that was kind of pre-gay rights movement, and I was like, wow, that movie's only 15 years old, but the stuff they're saying in this movie would never be acceptable today. People would lose their jobs over this kind of stuff today. Gay rights movement went from outcast to presidential level issue, right? Wherever you stand on the issue, at the presidential level, I know where the presidential candidates were. I know where our United States senators are. I know where our members of Congress are. I didn't have to think about it. And I know what specifics they would say, because it's so ingrained in the Democratic Party and Republican Party agenda that it's laid out for them. I don't know what a lot of them would say on domestic violence. I don't know what they think the solutions could be. And one of the ways we know it's not as top a priority as it should be, think of the Family Crisis Center, right? So the Family Crisis Center has been underfunded since I got in office. And that was 2002. I've been out 10 years now and it's still underfunded. Every 2 or 3 years, the Washington Post will do some shocking expose about how the shelters, fall apart. And they called me up before the last time. I said, look, I've seen this movie before, and I know you weren't a reporter before you were in college, so the last time it came out. But the place is underfunded. And the way you know the place is underfunded is you do just a dollar's comparison to the DC shelter system or Montgomery County, you'll see it immediately. DC system has quadruple funding to what we've got, maybe even more. In fact, they're at a point where they can do annual fundraisers without the city giving them money and raise more than the Family Crisis Center had. And I got in trouble for saying this when I was trying to make the point when I was in office, but I said, look, we've got more shelter space for pets than we have for people here in Princeton. And I'll take it one step further. They wouldn't build a new Family Crisis Center for women and kids, but we did build a new shelter for pets here in Princeton. One of our newest facilities is a pet shelter. Now, I like dogs. Don't go out here saying Glenn Ivy hates puppies or anything like that, because I'm cool with them too. But how can we find the money for that, but not this? Or just to stick close. A little while, like a couple weeks ago, they were talking about, okay, the Redskins are going to need a new home.
Oh, you gotta be careful.
Yeah. So the governor throws out
Option code.
yeah, down here by MGM. Not died, because who wants the Redskins right now, right? I mean, please take them. But think about that. He put that out there, confident that he would have political support for it. And knowing it would cost like $2 billion. $2 billion. That's almost as much as our county budget is for the whole year for everything. And he's going to put out for a football team that's going to play 8 games, 2 preseason, and lose most of them anyway. And think that's okay. How can it be that we can come up with $2 billion for a football stadium, but the Family Crisis Center is annually underfunded and everybody knows it? It's a question of priorities and us forcing them to make this a priority. One other quick point. The money piece, and I like the idea about automatic funding. Jolene, when she was in the House of Delegates, said, okay, well maybe one revenue stream is we'll put a little extra money on when you get your wedding license. And it's like $10 extra or something. You know, she caught some heck about that, but you're anti-marriage. Well, okay, well not really, but I'm anti-marriage where the guy's beating his wife all the time and thinking it's okay and she ain't got no place to go. I'm anti that. So how come we can't come up with some money for that? So look, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but we can make a change with this. The gay rights movement went from outcast to like calling the shots in about 10 years. In about 10 years. You pick up the wedding page now, and there's 2 guys getting married. You cut on the TV, on commercials, and there's 2 guys with their kids. And okay, fine, but one of the things that's amazing to me is how quickly that happened and how long this has taken. I'm looking out in the audience, I'm seeing a lot of faces I've seen before. You've been fighting a good fight on this for years, actually not decades now, if we're honest with each other. And we're not moving as fast as we can. We're not moving this as quickly as we should. And it's not because it's just our fault or anything like that. It's just that we've got to find a way that politically makes this catch fire. And politicians, I'm a recovering politician, so I can tell you this. Man, if you want to get a politician's attention, put them on the spot. You don't have to be hostile about it. And make them understand that this could be a make or break election issue. And we'll get moving. It won't take another 20 years if we can get them thinking about it in those terms. So look, you're doing the right thing. You're working hard, you're toiling in the vineyards, you're making a difference. And I commend you for it. But there's another way we can work this and force them to help us do the heavy lift. Drag them into this. It's not easy to talk about domestic violence, especially if you're new to the topic. But we can make them talk about it. And I know it's not easy to find money most of the time. It's easy to find it for a football team. Or to spin out some of these election proposals. But we can force them into knowing that they've got to find the money to fix this. Keep up the good work, keep making a difference. Drag other people in, build on your network, and let's take it to the next level.
Thank you. Keep going.
You are awesome as always.
Thank you, everybody. One more round of applause. And this is one I do. Who, as he would admit, is not as pretty as his other half, but as I like him. What I'd like to do now, ladies and gentlemen, is just thank you so much for all of your involvement, all of your great questions, and everything you brought to the table. And as Mr. Ivey said, this is an election issue. Make it happen. Community Crisis Service is going to make sure that we have the money to make Family Crisis Center shelter the best it's ever been. And I vowed to my board when we went forward with this that it would be amazing. So those of you who are in the audience who are on the CCSI board, would you stand for us for just a second? This very courageous group of people gave me permission to move this all forward and to make this happen. And they have worked tirelessly to make sure that domestic violence is something we're going to take on and we're going to eradicate. So, I thank you once again for your attendance today. Anybody who needs certificates of attendance, if you signed up, I'll make sure it gets mailed to you. Thank you so much. Go out, enjoy the rest of the day, and enjoy some of this really great weather. Great to have you today. Oh, yes. I'm sorry. David pointed out something very appropriate before we let folks go. Where is Mr. Bill? Mr. Bill is back there. Who's doing our closing prayer, Bill? That would be David. That's how he knows. Ladies and gentlemen, the chair of my board, the Reverend, almost Doctor, David North.
May we all please stand. With our hearts filled with inspiration and education, knowing that we have this opportunity to go forth from this place empowered and encouraged, we hope and claim with God as our strength and our guide to make the day come sooner than later, to cause domestic violence to diminish and to even disappear.